Hey there YouTube viewers, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria, and I need a little bit of help with my stick here. It's got a lovely great shaft and a nice knob on the end, but the reason I want to ask you, I've noticed that you quite like interactive videos, as everybody does, and I don't know a huge amount about sticks. I know some stuff about sticks and I'm learning. Why am I talking about sticks? Well, quite simply, in the last few months, couple of months maybe, not very long, I've started getting into getting antique sticks for a number of reasons. Partly because I'm interested in interested in walking stick defense in old sources. I'm interested in it in the modern world as well, but I'm interested in particularly the Victorian period sources looking at the use of everyday objects such as walking sticks for self-defense. Very, very interesting. It links in with a lot of the other martial arts sources I study and systems I study, but that's for another video. So I've been buying several kind of antique sticks when I can, and I picked this one up, and I don't really know anything about it, so I'm learning a bit about European sticks, but this, as far as I'm aware, is not a European stick. So what the dealer told me, who I bought a bunch of sticks off, was that this was from South Africa and possibly Zulu. Now that sort of made sense to me because I'm vaguely aware of having seen sticks from South Africa that did look like this. A quick little bit of Googling did indeed seem to agree with that. This is the general shape of a South African stick. Why did the dealer think this was from South Africa? Well, quite simply because when he bought it, it came with a bunch of stuff from South Africa, including some war medals that were South African related. So this is probably early 20th century, early to mid 20th century. It's got some age to it according to the other stuff he bought it with. So it's kind of like the same age as your granddad or great granddad might be, or grandmother. But what I don't know is what kind of wood it is. Now what I can tell you is it's incredibly rigid. It's got practically no flex whatsoever. It seems to have a fairly long fibrous grain, and it's relatively heavy. It's not as heavy as ebony or anything like that, but it's relatively dense and heavy for its size. It's quite a small stick. It doesn't look very big, does it? But having the knob on the end, and I'll talk about that in a second, you wouldn't think it was that heavy, but it feels heavier than you would expect it to be. So it seems to be really, really strong, but it's also really, really stiff. It doesn't seem to have much flex to it. Now the knob at the end, just briefly talking about, so on my Patreon channel, for Patreon viewers, you'll know what I'm talking about. I did a video starting to introduce the topic of sticks and talking about the fact that I am going to talk more about sticks and the use of sticks and the different types of sticks, particularly self-defense sticks from the Victorian and Edwardian period mostly. So I've talked a bit about them and showed two ebony sticks actually on the Patreon channel. If you're interested in extra videos, by the way, I do 3 extra videos per month on Patreon, and link below to my Patreon account. Yeah, so I started talking about sticks there. I am going to be doing more stuff on sticks and the use of sticks, but the knob is very, very interesting because I remember before I started looking at the stick sources, I just kind of always assumed it would be the hitting end or the hitty end, as I know the hitty bit that some of you like when I say it. The hitting bit would be the sort of knob end, and indeed you can hit someone with your knob, but there is another option, and an option which I would generally prefer actually, and that is essentially using it as a pommel. And there are a couple of reasons why I generally prefer it at this end. One is because you can hold the stick right at the back without any danger of your hand slipping off, and actually because it's got a little bit of concentrated mass like a pommel, it does give a nicer balance and makes the weapon quicker. Now indeed you could hit someone in the head really hard with the knob end, with the knob, so I'm making myself laugh, and that would be effective, but generally speaking you'd have to hold just as it's described in the manuals, usually down to about the elbow, about 12 inches below your hand. Hold it like a shillelagh. So this is generally, I would describe it as the shillelagh grip, shillelagh being the Irish stick used for stick fighting in Ireland. And in the 19th century, this was one way, indeed, especially if you've got a big knob, one way you could hold and use a stick. And the back end is used defensively, and I would argue potentially hooking as well. Okay, but usually it's described as guarding and defending, so you can actually parry, essentially block a opposing stick blow with the back end. Okay. And so you could block with the back end and then immediately come up with a blow with the longer end. However, in most applications, for example, against someone with a knife or something like that, I would personally prefer to have a longer, more nimble object that's more similar to the swords and the sticks that I'm used to using. And you've got the use of the point, of course, remember, or the ferrule. In this case, you don't have a ferrule, but the bottom end, essentially, the point into the face. Of course, you can use it half-sworded as well, as an equivalent, so holding it a bit more like a bayonet. I'll talk about all of this in more detail in future videos, but what I would like to know from you guys is, what can you tell me about my stick? Okay, can you tell what wood it is? You can see that it has a dark side and it has a light side. Okay, it's very stiff, it's relatively heavy, but not as heavy as ebony. Is it South African? I think it probably, I feel 90% certain that it is indeed South African. But does it have a particular name? Who had them, who used them, who carried them, and for what purpose? Presumably just as a walking stick, but sometimes for hitting things or people with. And what is the wood? Can you tell me what wood this is? Is it a particular South African wood, and what are its qualities? Is it strong? Should I be careful with it, or is it indeed very strong and I shouldn't be too worried about it? At the moment, this is the kind of stick that some of my sticks have got silver or fancy bits on them. Not ivory, actually. I don't have any with ivory on, but silver. I'm just looking down at some on the floor. Mostly silver bits, but they've got fittings on them, so I wouldn't really want to, I like having them, but I wouldn't really want to train with them or wave them around too much. Whereas this being a simple wooden stick, I feel quite inclined to wave it around and do things, and I have in fact been doing a little bit earlier in the garden. So am I safe doing that with this wood? So there we go. My challenge to you is, tell me about my stick. What wood is it? Where's it from? Does it have a name? Does the stick have a name? Does the wood have a name? And I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers, folks. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. We have extra videos on Patreon, and you can follow us on Facebook.